For 18 years, I grew up believing my dad was dead. It was a truth as solid and unshakable as the ground I walked on, a core part of my identity, the single defining tragedy of my childhood. But last month, in the middle of a mundane Tuesday afternoon, that truth shattered. I found out he's been alive all along. Not just alive, but watching me and my mom from the shadows, a silent, ghostly presence in a life built on a lie. And the way I found out? The casual, almost cruel nature of the revelation still makes me sick. A cold knot of dread that twists in my stomach every single time I think about it. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and my childhood was a monument to a single, devastating tragedy. My dad died in a car accident when I was just 2 years old. That's what my mom told me. That's what every relative, their voices hushed with sorrow, repeated at every holiday, every family gathering. I grew up with the weight of that loss, a permanent shadow that followed me everywhere. The framed picture on our mantle, his smile both familiar and impossibly distant, felt like a silent tombstone. We lit candles on his birthday, a somber ritual that left my throat tight with unspoken grief. My mom would sit quietly on the couch, tears streaming down her face on anniversaries I didn't truly understand, but whose sorrow I felt in my bones. I lived with the hole his absence left every single day. At every school play, every baseball game, every graduation, every father-son event, I was the kid with no dad, a label that felt like a brand on my skin. I would watch my friends and their fathers. A pang of longing so sharp it was almost physical, and I carried that emptiness everywhere, a permanent, quiet grief that was as much a part of me as my own shadow. I accepted it. I grieved him. I loved the memory. But as I got older, as the years peeled away the naivete of childhood, little things began to prick at the edges of the narrative I had been fed. The cracks in the foundation started to show. My mom never showed me his death certificate. When I asked about it, her smile would tighten, a fleeting, painful grimace, and she'd brush it off with a casual dismissal that felt anything but casual. She got random phone calls late at night, and I would hear her voice drop to a hushed whisper, her words strained and desperate. She would always step outside to answer them, walking into the cold night air, as if afraid the walls of our house would betray her. It was a secret ritual I witnessed dozens of times, but never truly understood. Once, when I was 13, I was getting a glass of water from the kitchen when I caught her whispering into the phone. He can't know. He's too young. At the time, I thought she was just talking about bills or some family drama, some secret I wasn't old enough to be a part of. The thought barely registered. Now I realize, with a cold, terrifying clarity, she wasn't. She was lying to protect me from a truth so dark it would unravel everything. Every little inconsistency, every whispered word, every secretive phone call was a breadcrumb leading to a devastating revelation. But I was blind to the trail, living in a world of manufactured grief, mourning a ghost I didn't even realize was a lie. The feeling of being watched, of being secretly protected, was something I always felt but never knew how to explain. A vague sense of unease that I dismissed as my overactive imagination. It was the feeling of being a character in a story, and the author was always just out of sight, always watching. 2 months ago, everything I knew, everything I believed, everything that gave my life its meaning, shattered into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. I was at a coffee shop downtown, the familiar scent of espresso and sugar filling the air. I had just sat down with a book when a man, a total stranger with a weary, knowing look in his eyes, sat down across from me at my small table and just stared. He didn't say anything. He didn't break eye contact. The silence was unnerving. I was about to get up and leave, to escape the suffocating weight of his gaze, when he leaned forward, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that was meant only for my ears. "Ethan, you look just like me when I was your age." My heart stopped. My blood ran cold. The mug I was holding felt heavy and suddenly foreign in my hand. Because this man, this total stranger, he had the same exact eyes as me, the same shade of green with flecks of gold, the same slightly crooked smile that I saw every time I looked in the mirror. It was impossible. And yet, there was a familiarity that felt as though I had been born knowing him. Before I could even react, before I could ask him who he was or how he knew my name, he slid a small, faded photograph across the table. My eyes focused on the image. It was him, younger, with a full head of hair, holding a tiny, swaddled baby. Me. And on the back of the photo, written in my mom's unmistakable looping handwriting, were the words, "For Daniel. Come home safe." The world tilted. The familiar sounds of the coffee shop faded into a distant hum, replaced by a deafening roar in my ears. Because that was my dad's name. Daniel Miller. I sat there stunned, my mind unable to process the evidence in front of me. The man, my father, simply stood up, his eyes a mirror of my own disbelief and pain, and walked away, leaving me alone with the photograph, a ghost from the past who had returned to haunt my present, to unravel the very fabric of my existence with a single, brutal moment of truth. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. The logical part of my brain was screaming in disbelief, but the evidence was right there, cold and undeniable, clutched in my shaking hand. I felt betrayed, angry, terrified. All at once, the emotions crashing over me in a tidal wave. If he was alive, why did my mom lie? Why did she make me grieve someone who was never gone? Why did she let me live with the emptiness, the hole, the sadness that had defined my entire life? I felt a wave of nausea. The grief I had carried for 18 years suddenly felt like a joke, a pointless, cruel performance I had been forced to participate in. The weight of his absence had been a lie. I stormed home that night, the photograph in my pocket a sharp, painful weight against my leg, my mind racing, a hurricane of questions and accusations. Every memory, every story about my dead dad, every candle lit on his birthday, felt like a deliberate deception, a theatrical performance designed to keep me in the dark. The entire foundation of my life felt like it was crumbling beneath me. I walked through the door of the house I had grown up in, the house that now felt like a cage built of secrets. When I showed my mom the picture, she went a terrifying, unnatural pale, her face draining of all color. She sat down on the couch like her legs had given out from under her, her body collapsing onto the cushions, the life seeming to drain from her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, with tears welling in her eyes, she said, her voice a fragile whisper, "Ethan, I never told you because your dad is dangerous." I didn't believe her. I thought she was lying, trying to cover up years of deception with a cheap excuse, a last-ditch attempt to save herself. But then she told me the truth, and that truth was far more horrifying than any lie she could have ever crafted. It turned out, my dad wasn't dead. He had been hiding after committing a serious crime years ago. Not murder, not assault, but something that could have landed him in prison for decades. Something that could have shattered our family, that could have destroyed our lives, that could have taken him from us just the same, but with the cold, brutal finality of a prison cell instead of the merciful finality of death. Mom said she lied to protect me, to give me a chance at a normal life, a life where I wouldn't have to carry the shame and the burden of his past. She said that if I had known he was alive, I might have tried to find him, and he might have tried to drag me into his dark and dangerous world, a world of secrets and shadows. But what destroyed me wasn't just the shock of his past. It was the fact that he had been watching us. That's when the second revelation hit me, a new, more profound sense of betrayal. Mom admitted, her voice trembling with guilt, that she had sometimes seen him. A familiar old sedan parked across the street, a figure behind the tinted windows. Birthdays, graduations, even my prom night. He was there. Not as a father, not as a family man, not as a loving presence, just as a shadow. Watching. Always watching. A ghost in the very real, very painful life he had abandoned. He was there for every milestone, every important moment, and I had no idea. He watched me grieve him. He watched me light candles for a dead man who was in a car across the street. The man at the cafe wasn't some random impulsive reunion, an emotional breakdown after years of silence. It was him stepping out of the shadows, breaking the rules of his own pathetic game, because he wanted me to know now. He chose this moment to reveal himself, to remind me of his existence, to tell me that a part of him was always there. The sheer audacity of it, the cold calculation, sickened me. I didn't sleep for days after that. Every memory of my life felt like a lie. Every single conversation, every picture of him, every moment of grief felt like a cruel, theatrical performance I had been forced to star in. Was I supposed to hate him for abandoning me? Or hate my mom for lying to me all these years, for letting me live in a lie? And deep down, one question, more painful than all the others, kept tearing me apart, ripping at the fragile threads of what I thought was love. If he's been watching me all these years, does that mean part of him still loves me? Or was I just some possession, a toy he couldn't play with but wanted to keep tabs on? Right now, I don't know what's worse. Living 18 years thinking my dad was dead, grieving a person who was alive and well, or knowing he was alive the whole time, a ghost haunting my life, and chose to be nothing more than a shadow. I haven't spoken to him since that cafe, not a single word. But something tells me this story isn't over. Because once you learn that the dead can be alive, that a person you thought was gone is still here, you start questioning everything you thought you knew. Every person, every memory, every truth. All of it is a lie, a house of cards built on a foundation of sand. The man I knew as my father was a lie. My grief was a lie. My entire childhood was a fabrication. And I don't know how you rebuild from that, how you live with the knowledge that you can't trust your own memories, your own family. The emptiness I once felt from his absence has been replaced by a new kind of emptiness, a void created by a lifetime of deception. I am a stranger in my own story, haunted not by a ghost, but by a man who chose to be one. So tell me, if you found out someone you loved wasn't really dead, but had been secretly watching you for years, would you forgive them? Or cut them out forever?